Matagal kong hinintay ang araw na to. Hindi para tumanggap ng mga medalyang to. Gusto kong ibigay ang karangalan sa taong nagdala sa akin dito. Ma, narito ako ngayon dahil sa walang katulad mong pagmamahal. Yung pagmamahal na kayang tiisin ang pagod, mapagtapos lang ako. Yung pagmamahal na kayang tiisin ang sariling gutom, ibigay lang ang gusto ko. Yung pagmamahal na kayang itago ang lungkot para maging masaya lang kami. Yung kayang sabihin, okay lang lahat. Huwag lang bumigat ang loob ko. Alam kong hindi naging madali para sa'yo. Ma, mula nang mawala si Papa, ikaw na tumayong mama at Papa ko. Kinaya mo ang lahat-lahat dahil nangako ka sa akin ng gabing yun.
Joey, anak, kakayanin ko ang lahat para sa iyo.
Kaya nga, alam kong sasabihin mo sa akin proud ka. Pero mas gusto kong sabihin sa lahat na mas proud ako sa mama ko.
Catch 'em all.
To understand leadership as it's viewed and practiced today, it's important to recognize that the concept of leadership has changed over time. Leadership typically reflects the larger society, and theories have evolved as norms, attitudes, and understandings in the larger world have changed. Over time, a number of leadership theories have emerged to explain what leadership is. These various leadership theories can be categorized into 6 basic approaches. The earliest studies of leadership adopted the belief that leaders, who were always thought of as male, were born with certain heroic leadership traits and natural abilities of power and influence. In organizations, social movements, religions, governments, and the military, leadership was conceptualized as a single great man who put everything together and influenced others to follow along based on the strength of inherited traits, qualities, and abilities. Beginning in the 1920s, researchers looked to see if leaders had particular traits or characteristics, such as intelligence or energy, that distinguished them from non-leaders and contributed to success. It was thought of that traits could be identified, leaders would be predicted, or perhaps even trained. Although the research failed to produce a list of traits that would always guarantee leadership success, the interest in leadership characteristics has continued to the present day. The failure to identify a universal set of leadership traits led researchers in the early 1950s to begin looking at what a leader does rather than who he or she is. One line of research focused on what leaders actually do on the job, such as various management activities, roles, and responsibilities. These studies were soon expanded to try to determine how effective leaders differ in their behavior from ineffective ones. Researchers looked at how a leader behaved towards followers and how this correlated with leadership effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Researchers next began to consider the contextual and situational variables that influence what leadership behaviors will be effective. The idea behind contingency theories is that leaders can analyze their situations and tailor their behavior to improve leadership effectiveness. Major situational variables are the characteristics of followers, characteristics of the work environment and follower tasks, and the external environment. Contingency theories, sometimes called situational theories, emphasize that leadership cannot be understood in a vacuum separate from various elements of the group or organizational situation. Influence theories examine influence processes between leaders and followers. One primary topic of study is charismatic leadership, which refers to leadership influenced based not on position or formal authority, but rather the qualities and charismatic personality of the leader. Related areas of study are leadership vision and organizational culture. Leaders influence people to change by providing an inspiring vision of the future and shaping the culture and values needed to attain it. And finally, relational theories. Since the late 1970s, many ideas of leadership have focused on the relational aspect, that is, how leaders and followers interact and influence one another. Rather than being seen as something a leader does to a follower, leadership is viewed as a relational process that meaningfully engages all participants and enables each person to contribute to achieving the vision. Interpersonal relationships are seen as the most important facet of leadership effectiveness. Two significant relational theories are transformational leadership and servant leadership. These leadership theories can help you develop understanding and skills to make you a better leader. The LPC theory, the path-goal theory, and Vroom's decision tree approach together redirect the study of leadership. Not surprising then, other situational theories have been developed. Moreover, there continues to be changes and refinements to the original situational models. Let's take a look at the Leader-Member Exchange Model. The Leader-Member Exchange Model, or LMX, of leadership stresses the importance of variable relationships between supervisors and each of their subordinates. Each supervisor-subordinate pair is referred to as a vertical dyad. The model differs from earlier approaches in that it focuses on the different relationships leaders often establish between subordinates. This figure shows the basic concepts of the leader-member exchange theory. The model suggests that supervisors establish a special relationship with a small number of trusted subordinates referred to as the in-group. The in-group often receives special duties requiring more responsibility and autonomy. They also receive special privilege, such as more discretion about work schedules. Members of the in-group are also likely to be privy to sensitive information and are likely in the know about upcoming events before others. They may also receive more rewards and generally stronger support from the leader. Subordinates who are not part of this group are called out-group because they receive less of the supervisor's time and attention. Members of the out-group are likely to be assigned the more mundane tasks of the group, and they might not be in the loop insofar as information that's being shared. They may also receive fewer rewards and overall weaker support from the leader. Note that the figure of the leader has a dyadic, a one-to-one relationship with each of the 5 subordinates. Early in his or her interaction with given subordinates, the supervisor initiates either an in-group or out-of-group relationship. It's not clear how the leader selects members of the in-group, but the decision may be based on personal compatibility and the subordinate's competence. Research has confirmed the existence of in-groups and out-groups. In addition, studies generally have found that in-group members tend to have higher levels of performance and satisfaction than out-group members. The Hershey and Blanchard model is based on the notion that appropriate leader behavior depends on the readiness of the leader's followers. In this instance, readiness refers to the subordinate's degree of motivation, competence, experience, and interest in accepting responsibility. Here's the basic model. The figure suggests that as readiness of followers improves, the leader's basic style should also change. When subordinate readiness is low, for example, the leader should rely on a telling style by providing direction and defining roles. When low to moderate readiness exists, the leader should use a selling style by offering direction and role definition accompanied by an explanation and information. In the case of moderate to high follower readiness, the leader should use a participating style, allowing followers to share in decision-making. Finally, when follower readiness is high, the leader is advised to use a delegating style by allowing followers to work independently with little or no oversight. The Hershey and Blanchard theory suggests that leader behavior should vary in response to the readiness of followers. Transactional leadership is essentially the same as management in that it involves routine, regimented activities. Transformational leadership focuses on the basic distinction between leading for change and leading for stability. According to this viewpoint, much of what a leader does occurs in the course of normal, routine, work-related transactions, like assigning work, evaluating performance, making decisions, and so forth. Transformational leadership is the set of capabilities that allows the leader to change, to create vision, and to execute effectively. Only a leader with tremendous influence can hope to perform these functions successfully. Some experts believe that change is such a vital organizational function that even successful firms need to change regularly to avoid complacency and stagnation. Accordingly, leadership for change is also important. Leaders may also find it necessary to transition from either transformational or transactional leadership to the other. Transformational leadership is the set of abilities that allows the leader to recognize the need for change, to create a vision to guide the change, and to execute the change effectively. Perspective based on charismatic leadership assumed that charisma is an individual characteristic of the leader. Charisma is a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires support and acceptance. Charismatic leadership is accordingly a type of influence based on the leader's personal charisma. All else being equal, someone with charisma is more likely to be able to influence others than someone without. Robert House first proposed a theory of charismatic leadership based on research findings from a variety of social science disciplines. His theory suggests that charismatic leaders are likely to have a lot of self-confidence, firm confidence in their beliefs and ideals, and a strong need to influence people. They also tend to communicate high expectations about follower performance and to express confidence in their followers. This figure portrays the three elements of charismatic leadership in organizations that most experts acknowledge today. First, charismatic leaders are able to envision likely future trends and patterns, to set high expectations for themselves and for others, and to model behaviors consistent with meeting those expectations. Next, charismatic leaders are able to energize others by demonstrating personal excitement, personal confidence, and constant patterns of success. Finally, charismatic leaders enable others by supporting them, empathizing with them, and expressing confidence in them. The charismatic leader is characterized by these three fundamental attributes. As illustrated, these are behaviors resulting in envisioning, energizing, and enabling. Charismatic leaders can be a powerful force in any organizational setting. There are clear implications for attribution theory in leadership, especially when leadership is framed through the eyes of followers. Basically then, the attribution perspective holds that when behaviors are observed in a context associated with leadership, different people may attribute varying levels of leadership ability or power to the person displaying those behaviors. We might subsequently conclude that an individual is a leader because of both behavior and behavior of others. However, in a different setting, we observe that a person seems to be not especially confident or decisive. In this case, we're more likely to assume that a person is not really a leader. These attributions we make subsequently affect both our own behavior and the actual capacity of an individual to behave like a leader. Attribution perspective on leadership holds that when behaviors are observed in a context associated with leadership, different people may attribute varying levels of leadership ability or power to the person displaying those behaviors. Leadership substitutes are individual, task, or organizational characteristics that tend to outweigh the leader's ability to affect subordinate satisfaction and performance. In other words, if certain factors are present, the employee will perform his or her job capabilities without the direction of a leader. Unlike traditional theories, which assume that hierarchical leadership in one form or another is always important, the premise of leadership substitute perspective is that leader behaviors may be irrelevant in some situations. Individual ability, experience, training, knowledge, motivation, and professional orientation are among the characteristics that may substitute for leadership. Similarly, a task characterized by routine, a high degree of structure, frequent feedback, and intrinsic satisfaction may also render leader behavior unnecessary. Thus, if the task gives the subordinate enough intrinsic satisfaction, she or he may not need support from a leader. Explicit plans and goals, rules and procedures, cohesive work goals, a rigid reward structure, and physical distance between supervisor and subordinate are organizational characteristics that may substitute for leadership. Research has provided support for the concept of leadership substitutes, but additional research is needed to identify the potential substitutes and their impact on leadership effectiveness. Leadership neutralizers are factors that render ineffective a leader's attempts to engage in various leadership behaviors. The norms and cohesiveness of the group may be so strong that there's nothing the leader can do to change things. Of course, this pattern may also work in several different ways. The norms may dictate acceptable, but not high performance, and the leader may be powerless to improve things because the group is so cohesive. Or the norms may call for very high performance, such that the effective leader can't change anything about group dynamic or performance. In both cases, however, the process is the same. The leader's ability to alter the situation is neutralized by elements in that situation. In addition to group factors, elements of the job itself may also limit the leader's ability to make a difference. Consider, for example, employees working on a moving assembly line. Employees may only be able to work at the pace the line is moving, so performance quality is constrained by the speed of the line. Finally, organizational factors can also neutralize at least some forms of leader behavior. Many organizations today are using teams, and many other organizations are attempting to become less hierarchical. That is, to eliminate the old-fashioned command and control mentality often inherent in bureaucratic organizations, and to motivate and empower individuals to work independently. In each case, the role of leaders is also changing. Leaders were once expected to control situations, direct work, supervise people, closely monitor performance, make decisions, and structure activities. Many leaders today are being asked to change how they manage people. Perhaps the best description of this new role is that the leader is becoming a coach instead of an overseer or supervisor. A coaching perspective would call for the leader to help select team members and other new employees, to provide some general direction, and to help train and develop the team in the skills needed for members, and to help the team get the information and other resources that it needs. The leader may also have to resolve conflict among team members and mediate other disputes that arise. And coaches from many different teams may need to play important roles in linking the activities and functions of their respective teams. But beyond these activities, the leader keeps a low profile and lets the group get its work done with little to no direct oversight from the leader. Within the coaching role, some leaders have excelled at taking on more responsibilities as a mentor, the role of helping less experienced people learn the ropes and better prepare him or herself to advance within the organization. Leaders are increasingly being called upon to serve as coaches rather than supervisors. Strategic leadership is the capability to understand the complexities of both the organization and its environment, and to lead change in the organization as to achieve and maintain a superior alignment between the organization and its environment. In some ways, then, strategic leadership may be seen as an extension of the transformational leadership role. To be effective in this role, a manager needs to have a thorough and complete understanding of the organization, its history, its culture, its strengths, and its weaknesses. In addition, the leader needs to have a firm grasp on the organization's environment. This understanding must encompass current conditions and circumstances, as well as significant trends and issues on the horizon. The strategic leader also needs to recognize how the firm is currently aligned with its environment, where it relates effectively with that environment, and where it relates less effectively. Finally, looking at environmental trends and issues, the strategic leader works to improve not only the current alignment, but also future alignment. Strategic leadership is the capability to understand the complexities of both the organization and its environment, and to lead change in the organization as to achieve and maintain a superior alignment between the organization and its environment. In some ways, then, strategic leadership may be seen as an extension of the transformational leadership role. To be effective in this role, a manager needs to have a thorough and complete understanding of the organization, its history, its culture, its strengths, and its weaknesses. In addition, the leader needs to have a firm grasp on the organization's environment. This understanding must encompass current conditions and circumstances, as well as significant trends and issues on the horizon. The strategic leader also needs to recognize how the firm is currently aligned with its environment, where it relates effectively with that environment, and where it relates less effectively. Finally, looking at environmental trends and issues, the strategic leader works to improve not only the current alignment, but also future alignment. Virtual leadership uses distance technologies. In earlier times, leaders and their employees worked together in the same physical location and engaged in personal, i.e. face-to-face interactions on a regular basis. But in today's world, both leaders and their employees may work in locations that are far from one another. Such arrangements might include people who telecommute from a home office 1 or 2 days a week, and people who actually live and work far away from company headquarters and see one another in person very infrequently. Virtual leadership, therefore, is leadership via various forms of distance technologies. How then do managers carry out leadership when they don't have regular personal contact with their followers? And how do they help monitor and develop others? Communication between leaders and their subordinates will still occur, of course, but it may largely be by telephone, texting, and email. Hence, one implication may be that leaders in these situations simply need to work harder at creating and maintaining relationships with their employees that go beyond specific words and computer screens. Managers should take advantage of every single opportunity, whether they're in face-to-face situations, to go further than they might have done under different circumstances to develop a strong relationship. Beyond these simple prescriptions, there's no theory or research to guide managers functioning in a virtual world. Hence, as electronic communications continue to pervade the workplace, researchers and managers alike will need to work together to help frame the appropriate issues and questions regarding virtual leadership, and then collaborate to help address those issues and answer those questions.
Communication is the process of interacting with people, no matter whether you speak something or not, but your behavior, attitude, or body language conveys a message to the other party, meaning that communication is not dependent on words. It is possible even without the use of words. So now we are going to understand the process of communication. In the process of communication, the sender encodes a message through a proper channel, that is email, phone, SMS, etc., to the receiver. The receiver decodes the message and after interpreting it, gives a proper feedback through a proper channel to the sender. So in this way the process of communication continues. So now we are going to understand the types of communication. So on the basis of channel, there are two types of communication: verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Come, let's understand the meaning of verbal communication. The communication in which we use words and language to communicate the intended message to the other party is called verbal communication. It can be performed in two ways, that is oral communication and written communication. Oral communication is a communication through spoken words, that is face-to-face communication, voice chat, video conferencing, or communication over the telephone or mobile phone. On the other hand, written communication entails the use of letters, documents, emails, SMS, various chat platforms, social media, etc. to interact with people. What is non-verbal communication? Non-verbal communication is a wordless communication, as it does not use words. The communication takes place through signals such as facial expressions, body language, nodding of head, gestures, postures, eye contact, physical appearance, and so forth. Now come, let's understand the types of non-verbal communication. Kinesics. The communication through body language, facial expressions, gestures, postures, eye contacts is called as kinesics. In artifacts, you learn how the appearance of a person speaks a lot about his personality, that is, the way he or she is dressed, accessories carried by him, etc. Proxemics. The distance maintained by a person while communicating with another tells you a lot about their relationship. Chronemics is the use of time in communication. It tells you about how punctual or disciplined a person is, or how serious the person is regarding the matter. Vocalics. The volume, tone of voice and pitch used by the sender to transmit information is called vocalics. Haptics. The use of touch in communication to express emotions and feelings is called haptics. Come, let's discuss the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication. Meaning, verbal communication is the process of communication in which words and language is used to transmit the message to another person. Whereas in non-verbal communication, we do not use words. Instead, we use signals to transmit the message. The signals can be facial expressions, eye contact, body language, paralanguage, sign language, etc. Next, in verbal communication, the transmission of message is very fast and feedback can also be provided instantly. Whereas non-verbal communication relies on the understanding of the receiver, so it consumes a lot of time. When it comes to delivery of message, there are very less chances of confusion in case of verbal communication. Contrary to this, the chances of confusion and misunderstanding are relatively high in non-verbal communication. In verbal communication, the presence of both the parties, that is sender and receiver, at the place of communication is not necessary. As against, in non-verbal communication, the presence of both the parties at the time of communication is a must. The best thing about verbal communication is that the message can be clearly understood and feedback can also be provided immediately. Whereas the best thing about non-verbal communication is that it complements verbal communication. That is, it helps in understanding the lifestyle and emotions of the sender.